I am going to tell you something that will make you uncomfortable, and I need you to stay right here and listen, because at the end of this, I am going to reveal the one secret that every matriarch in every family knows, but is too terrified to say out loud. It is the secret that will either set you free or confirm that you have already lost yourself. And no, I am not going to give it to you easy. You are going to earn it by sitting through the ugliest truth I have ever spoken. Last Wednesday at 10 in the morning, my daughter Elena called me crying, 55 years old, and the woman was sobbing into the phone like the world was collapsing around her. A liquidity crisis, she called it. She used that word, liquidity, like she was running a hedge fund instead of begging her 80-year-old mother for money. I let her talk for exactly 47 seconds. I know, because I was watching the clock on my kitchen wall, the one my late husband Samuel mounted the year we bought this house with cash. No mortgage, no favors, no handouts. 47 seconds of manufactured panic. And then I said one word, no, and I hung up. I walked out to my garden, I touched the petals on my orchids, and I felt a kind of stillness I had not felt in decades. Not a single tremor of guilt, not one. And that is when I knew that the woman I used to be, the one who would have wired that money before the tears even dried, that woman was finally, mercifully, dead. Now you are sitting there thinking I am cold. You are thinking, that is her daughter. How could she do that? And that reaction right there is exactly why you are losing. Because the system trained you to hear a mother say no and call it cruelty. The system trained you to believe that a black woman's only acceptable role, past 60, is to be a silent treasury, a warm body that writes checks and absorbs pain and never ever asks what she wants for herself. I lived inside that cage for 6 decades. I decorated it. I called it love, and it almost killed me. Let me take you back to Thanksgiving. My table cost $5,000. I am not telling you that to impress you. I am telling you that because I earned every cent of that table with 60 years of work in a country that looked at my skin and decided I was worth less before I even opened my mouth. I built a portfolio when banks would not lend to women who looked like me. I navigated boardrooms where they called me by my first name, while they called white colleagues half my age Mr. and Sir. I created generational wealth out of nothing but discipline and rage dressed up as patience. So when I set that table, I set it with the full weight of what it took to afford it. $5,000 of food, crystal, silver, and flowers. And while I was standing in my own kitchen, holding the serving knife, I heard them, my 2 children, Elena and Julian, sitting in the dining room with their spouses, whispering like conspirators in a cheap thriller. They were discussing how to restructure my investment funds once they moved me into an assisted living facility, a facility they had already researched, tours they had already taken, without asking me, without telling me. They were not worried about my health. My last blood panel came back cleaner than most 50-year-olds. They were worried that I was spending what they had already mentally cataloged as their inheritance. My trips to Kyoto and Lisbon, my longevity treatments, my first-class seats, Every dollar I spent on my own joy was to them a dollar stolen from their future. I stood there holding that knife, and something cracked inside me. Not broke, cracked. The way a shell cracks when something alive decides it is time to come out. I realized in that kitchen, surrounded by the smell of food I had cooked for people who were planning my institutional burial, that I was not a mother to them. I was a vending machine with a heartbeat, an ATM they wished would malfunction just long enough for them to grab the cash before the screen went dark for good. But before I tell you what I did next, you need to understand the lie they have been feeding you your entire life, because it is the same lie that almost swallowed me whole. The lie is this, that your family is your responsibility forever. That being a good mother means bleeding yourself dry and calling it devotion. That your peace is a luxury you have not earned as long as someone in your bloodline is struggling. They package it in scripture, in tradition, in guilt. They make it sound holy, but I am telling you, from the other side of 80 years on this earth, that lie is a leash, and the people holding the other end of that leash are not doing it because they love you. They are doing it because your sacrifice is cheaper than their accountability. Elena, my daughter, turned fragility into a profession. She has spent 30 years manufacturing emergencies, vague health scares, marriages that always seem to be on the edge of collapse, financial shortfalls that conveniently arrive at the end of every quarter. She learned early that if she cried hard enough and long enough, I would open my purse and my veins in equal measure. She never wanted to stand on her own legs, because why would she when my spine was available as a permanent crutch? That $40,000 call last Wednesday was not a crisis. It was a debt from a lifestyle she refuses to downsize. A vacation home she cannot afford, but will not sell, because selling it would mean admitting she is not the woman she pretends to be at brunch. She wanted me to fund her performance again. And Julian, my son, 52 years old, and the man looks at me like a spreadsheet. He is smart, I will give him that. Educated, successful on paper, but his ambition has no floor and no ceiling, and his conscience left the building years ago. He is the one who brought Dr. Aris Thorne into my life, introduced him as a geriatric specialist who could help monitor my health. Monitor. That word should have been my first warning. You do not monitor a person. You monitor a machine. You monitor an investment. That is exactly what I was to Julian, an aging asset that needed supervision so it would not depreciate before he could liquidate it. Dr. Thorne was ready, eager even, to write reports about my so-called decision fatigue the moment I stopped saying yes. That is how the system works. You refuse to hand over your money, and suddenly you are mentally unfit. You demand boundaries, and suddenly you need evaluation. The medical establishment, the legal establishment, and the family unit all conspire to strip an old black woman of her sovereignty the second she starts acting like she owns her own life. Because in their minds, she does not. She never did. I want you to hear that. I want it to sit in your chest like a stone. Because if you are watching this and you recognize any of what I am describing, then you already know what I am about to say, even if you are not ready to hear it. If you are done being a doormat for people who would step over your body to get to your bank account. Type strength in the comments right now. Not because it is a cute engagement trick, but because I need to know if you are still in this fight or if you already surrendered. Now let me tell you what I did after that Thanksgiving dinner, because what happened in the next 7 days was the most violent act of self-preservation I have ever committed, and I would do it again without hesitation. Day 1. That night, after they all left with full stomachs and empty consciences, I sat in my library and I made a decision. The Ruth Williams Rescue Agency was permanently closed. No more emergency wire transfers. No more co-signing loans for people who have never once asked me how I slept. No more absorbing the shrapnel of lives that grown adults refuse to manage. Closed, shut, boarded up. Day 3. Elena called with the $40,000 performance. I said no, and I disconnected the call. Within an hour, my phone rang 11 times. 11. From Elena, from Julian, from their spouses, from a cousin I have not spoken to in 3 years, who suddenly remembered I existed. The silence of my refusal detonated a bomb in a family that had been built entirely on the assumption that I would always say yes. When the foundation of your family structure is one person's endless compliance, a single no is an earthquake. Day 5. Julian and Elena arrived at my door without invitation. They brought concern on their faces and a trap in their briefcases. They sat in my library, the room where I have read every book that taught me how to think, and they told me they were worried about me. They said my sudden change in behavior was alarming. They used the word neurological. They wanted me to see Dr. Thorne for a full evaluation. They sat in my house, in chairs I paid for, under a roof I maintained for 40 years, and they tried to diagnose my freedom as a disease. Day 7. I did not give them a blood test. I gave them a legal notice. I had spent those 7 days not crying, not doubting, not negotiating. I had spent them with my attorneys. Every line of credit connected to my name was severed. Every account that any family member had access to was locked, transferred, and reclassified. I executed what my attorney calls the inviolable sanctuary maneuver. 100% of my liquid assets moved into a discretionary spendthrift trust administered by a fiduciary firm in a different legal jurisdiction. I removed myself entirely from the position of emotional decision maker. From that day forward, when Elena or Julian or anyone with my last name wanted $1 of my money, they would not call me. They would call a cold, efficient auditing firm that would demand proof of extreme need, a repayment plan, and market rate interest. I did not just close the bank. I burned the bank and built a fortress where it used to stand. I changed every password. I hired private security for my gate. I informed my children that all future contact would be conducted exclusively through my legal office. And then I did something that scandalized every single person in my circle. I booked a first-class ticket to the south of France, and I left. Now here is what nobody tells you about the aftermath of saving yourself. The world does not applaud. The system does not send flowers. When a black woman of 80 years decides that she is done sacrificing, the response is not admiration, it is punishment. Elena told relatives I was losing my mind. Julian consulted with attorneys about conservatorship. Dr. Thorne made himself available for depositions that never happened because my legal team is better than anything Julian can afford. The family narrative shifted overnight. I was no longer the pillar. I was the problem. The selfish old woman who abandoned her children. As if 55 and 52-year-old adults can be abandoned. As if grown people with degrees and careers and homes are orphans because their mother stopped writing checks. But here is what else happened, and this is the part I need you to tattoo on the inside of your skull. My blood pressure dropped 14 points in the first month. My sleep, which had been fractured for years by anxiety and midnight calls, became deep and unbroken. My cortisol levels, which my real physician measured, not the one Julian tried to plant, dropped so dramatically that she asked me what medication I had started. I told her the truth. I stopped carrying dead weight. The science is not complicated. When you spend decades in a state of compulsive caretaking, your body pays the tax. Your telomeres shorten. Your cells age faster. Your immune system weakens under the chronic load of other people's chaos. The moment I severed the cord, my biology responded like a prisoner seeing sunlight for the first time. I started NAD+ protocols, stem cell therapies, not because I am afraid of dying, but because I intend to live long enough to spend every last dollar on myself and leave nothing behind but an empty vault and a woman who finally learned what her own name tasted like when she said it without apology. And that brings me to what I promised you at the beginning, the one secret that every matriarch knows. Here it is. Your family does not want you to have peace. They want you to have purpose, and they want that purpose to be them. Your peace is a threat because a peaceful woman is a woman who has stopped performing. A woman who has stopped performing is a woman who might start asking questions. Questions like, why am I the only one who sacrifices? Why is my rest always negotiable? Why does my joy make everyone uncomfortable? The secret is not that your family is evil. The secret is that the system built them this way. It taught your children that your labor is infinite and your needs are optional. It taught your sons that your money is their safety net, and your daughters that your pain is their permission to never grow up. And it taught you, the matriarch, that your only value is in what you give, never in what you keep. I am done giving. I kept myself, and my orchids have never bloomed so well. If you have been sitting in a house full of people and feeling more alone than you have ever felt in your life, if you have been signing checks while your own dreams collect dust, if you have been called selfish for wanting one single afternoon that belongs to you and no one else, then hear me clearly. You do not owe your blood your bones. You gave them life. That debt is paid. Everything after that is a negotiation, and you have been negotiating against yourself for far too long. Elena called again last week. I did not answer. Julian sent a letter through his attorney. My attorney replied. The letter was 4 sentences long. I did not read it. I was in my garden, touching the petals of an orchid that took me 3 years to coax into bloom. 3 years of patience, of adjusting light and temperature and water. Nobody helped me with that orchid. Nobody funded it. Nobody called it a crisis when it would not open. I just showed up every day and gave it exactly what it needed, nothing more. And eventually it opened. That is what peace looks like. It is not the absence of noise. It is the presence of a woman who finally decided that she is the orchid, not the gardener for everyone else's weeds. Comment right now and tell me the last time you said yes to someone and felt your own life getting smaller. Or better yet, stop commenting and start building your fortress, because the people who need to hear this are the ones who are already reaching for the phone to call their mother and ask for money. And the people who need to live this are the ones whose hands are shaking right now, because they know, deep in their marrow, that I am talking directly to them. I am 80 years old. I have buried a husband, survived a system that wanted me silent, and outlived every single person who bet against me. And the thing that almost took me out was not racism, was not poverty, was not illness. It was the belief that loving my family meant dying for them quietly. I chose to live loudly instead. And if that makes me a villain in their story, then I will wear that crown with every piece of jewelry I bought with my own money, sitting in my own house, surrounded by my own silence. The rescue agency is closed. The fortress is built, and I am still here. That is not luck. That is strategy. And now you have it too. The question is whether you have the spine to use it.